When Elias first saw her, he wasn't sure if she was drunk or just crazy. A solitary figure staggered through the grass of the prairie during sunset, hair disheveled, steps unsteady, walking like a ghost trapped between realms. Then he heard it. She was laughing, but not the vivacious laugh of a young woman alive. No, this was not. This was the harsh sound of someone who had already lost. A rent piece of fabric hung limply from her shoulders, sliding with each movement. She clutched it to her, as if it were the last remnant of herself she still possessed, her flesh bruised, streaked with dried blood, her skin ashen against the waning light, the sort of view that stops a man's blood cold. Now let me ask the question to you. Had you seen her then, battered and isolated out there in the prairie? Would you have looked away, or would you have moved forward? Elias McGraw was 51 years old, a man who had planted more years in the ground than he had remaining. He'd endured drought, flame, and seen neighbors give up the land to hopelessness. He believed he'd seen everything the frontier threw at a man, but nothing in his life of more than 5 decades, weathered to a silver gray, had prepared him for this instant. His horse shied uneasily as Elias left the path and approached her. The nearer he got, the more real it was. She was not a ghost. She was not a vision born of whiskey. She was flesh and blood. She was a young woman, perhaps 24 at most, appearing as though she had crawled out of hell itself. Her bare feet were cut and bleeding, her arms raw from scratches, but worse than the injuries, her eyes. They didn't plead. They didn't fume. They were hollow, as though her soul had already begun to slip away. Elias went down on his knees as she fell against him. His weathered, calloused hands held steady the cloth at her breast, quivering in spite of all his years. That crack of a laugh escaped from her again. Harsh, delicate, and then words. She whispered that she was used goods, that no one's niceness could ever alter that, and for the first time in decades, Elias McGraw was left with not a word to say. He scooped her up as if she were nothing at all. Fact was, she weighed almost nothing, bones and bruises, and a final spark of energy that had gotten her this far. He laid her down on his horse and walked them back through the evening towards his cabin. The small ranch wasn't much, 4 pine walls, a leaky spring roof, and a fire consistent enough to warm a man tonight. Though, it needed to be enough to keep her warm as well. He put her in the guest room. She didn't struggle, didn't talk, just looked up at the ceiling, like her body was present, but her spirit was absent. Elias placed a plate of bread and beans on the side of her bed. She didn't even look at it. The morning after that, same thing. Next morning, still nothing. Most men would have shied away, perhaps even sent her back to town, telling her she wasn't their concern. But Elias wasn't most men. Day after day, he maintained a steady routine, cooking meals, setting out clean water, folding a blanket at the foot of the bed, even putting out one of his worn shirts on the chair, a shirt worn soft by years of sweat, smoke, and sun. Perhaps he hoped the scent of leather and wood smoke would remind her that not all men in this world were dangerous. And then, on the 3rd day, things shifted. He came in quietly, as ever, and noticed her shoulders draped with that tattered shirt. It slumped on her body, but she had selected it. She had decided to do away with that foul piece of clothing she had turned up in. Her hands trembled as she picked up a slice of bread, her jaws working slowly as if each morsel was a struggle. And then at last, her voice cut across the room, scarcely more than a whisper. "My name is Grace." It wasn't much. Just a name. But to Elias, it was the beginning crack of light in the darkness. And let me ask you this. If a soul as broken as hers could muster the courage to talk again, what else could she muster the courage to do? Now, tell me, wouldn't you linger to find out what comes next? For a couple of days, the ranch lay still. Elias stuck to his work. Grace stayed to herself, and the desert sun just kept beating down as usual, because out here life doesn't stop, because one heart is aching. Horses still need to be fed. Fences still need repair, and the dust never ceases seeping in under the door. But on those still evenings, Elias caught something. Grace wasn't gazing through him anymore. She was observing how he cut wood, observing how he fed the fire, observing how he poured his coffee at sunrise, observing as if she were trying to recall what a good life felt like. But that tenuous peace broke late one afternoon. Elias was carrying water when he saw a rider approaching slow down the trail. Dust hung in the air behind the horse, and the manner in which the man sat in the saddle gave Elias all he needed to know. Trouble was near. The rider reined up by the gate, surveyed the ranch as if it were already his, and spat on the ground. His coat was too good for a working man, and his nervously shifting eyes spoke louder than words. He wasn't here for stock. He wasn't here for commerce. He was here for her. "Name's mine," stated the man curtly. "That girl inside, she don't belong here. She belongs back in Winslow." Elias remained silent. He stood firm, one hand grasping the rail, the other beside the Winchester propped against the wall. The stranger slid down, swaggered up, and sneered. "You hiding her? Old man, think a dried up rancher like you can hold what ain't his," Elias finally replied. His words were soft, but hard as stone. "She belongs to no one." The rider laughed, a cold, harsh sound, and took a further step towards the door. It was at that moment that Elias moved, in a single movement. The Winchester was in his grip. The lever clicked, the barrel sitting level on the man's chest. There was silence. Even the horse shifted uncomfortably, feeling the turmoil in the air. The rider's smile dropped. He hadn't anticipated steel nerves from a man Elias's age. They glared at each other for a silent wind, whipping instant before the man spat a curse and backed away, then swung into the saddle. "This ain't over," he snarled before he turned his horse and rode off in a cloud of dust. Elias slid the rifle down, his hands shaking, not with fear, but with rage. Rage that any man could come riding up and take another human being as if she was nothing more than property. Anne Grace she had watched from the window, her complexion ghastly, her body shaking, but in her eyes, for the first time, something new. A spark, a glimmer of faith that perhaps, maybe, just maybe someone would stand and fight for her. And this is the thing about the West. Each man must determine what line he will draw. Elias had drawn his. If you think no human being should ever be used as property, then this is the type of story you'll want to follow to the end. Because what happened next would challenge Elias in ways any rifle standoff ever could. The morning after, the sound of horses came sooner than expected. Elias heard it long before he saw the riders, 2 men first, guns low on their thighs, a third behind them. He was heavier, broader, with the swagger of a man who was accustomed to giving orders. Calder, the trail boss. Elias knew him in an instant. Years before, they'd driven the same drive, slept beneath the same sky, herded cattle through storms that left a man's soul ragged. But time works its way into men differently. Calder had gone for power and brutality. Elias had gone for isolation and country. Calder reined his horse at the gate and sneered. "Still making ends meet here, I see. But you've got something that don't belong to you. You know why I am here. The girl." Elias had his rifle standing on the porch but not yet raised. "She belongs to nobody," Calder sneered, a dry, ugly laugh. "That is where you are wrong. She belongs to the house she fled from. Men paid for her. And men don't like being cheated." Calder's voice lashed out. "You think you can stash her here like some strayed cur?" The 2 riders closed in, faces cold, hands jerking close to their guns. The quiet piled up, the sort of quiet that makes even the birds fall silent. Elias's voice remained firm. "She stays." Calder's smile grew thinner. "Then you pay. Nothing is free, old friend. You wish to keep her. Trade me that land along the creek. Water rights are worth more than any woman. You know it, and I know it." For a moment, Elias remained silent. That was his blood, his years, his legacy. He would rather see the sky give way than relinquish it. His hand on the rifle tightened, prepared for the battle that may ensue. Then he felt it, a hand upon his arm. Grace had walked onto the porch. Her tone was gentle, fractured, but every word cut deeper than any knife. If they take me back, they'll kill me. Elias spun around. Her eyes were wide, not with tears, but with fear. It was the first time she'd ever asked him for something, not for food, not for comfort, simply for life. Something cracked inside Elias. The land meant everything. But what was land for a soul, pleading not to be hurled once more into the fire? His jaw was set. He slowly lowered the rifle, then looked at Calder. You can have the creek property, but she remains. Calder regarded him for a long time before bursting out with laughter. Always the idiot with a heart of gold. He spat on the ground, pulled on his reins, and with a nod the riders turned away. As the three rode into the sun, the ranch seemed smaller, emptier, quieter than ever before. Grace leaned against the post, her shoulders shuddering not of fear but of relief. Elias did not say a word. He knew what he had lost, but he also knew what he had preserved. And here's the part you can't turn your back on. A man who relinquishes the very earth under his boots to sacrifice another's soul is a man who stands at the precipice of everything. And the only question is this: how far can a man go before he loses himself entirely? The days after Calder rode away were heavy. The creek land was gone, carved out of Elias's soul and stolen away. Yet, in the still mornings, when the first light touched the hills and the smell of coffee drifted through the cabin, Elias felt something he hadn't in years. Peace, not the kind that comes from owning land, but the kind that comes from knowing you've saved another life. Grace started getting around the ranch in small increments, sweeping the porch, feeding the chickens, and on one night she even laughed when Elias's old mule wouldn't move from the corral. But this laugh was different. Not bitter, not hollow. It was the laugh of a woman remembering she was still alive. Elias worked alongside her, usually quiet, but their silences held comfort. Occasionally, they ate bread together beside the fire. Occasionally, they sat outdoors as the Arizona sky was set aflame. No guarantees, no declarations, just the quiet cadence of two broken lives coming to fit together. Grace still bore her wounds, some on her body, most in her soul. But when Elias looked at her, he did not see what she had been compelled to become. He saw the woman in front of him. And perhaps that is what love actually was on the frontier. Not church chimes, not eloquence, but two souls deciding, day by day, to remain. Now I ask you, if you encountered someone who'd had a history like Grace's, someone the world had deemed unclean, would you sacrifice your most valuable piece of earth to protect them, or would you release them, thinking it wasn't your battle? That is the line this tale leaves us with. Elias sacrificed a piece of himself, not for what Grace had been, but for what she might yet be. And that is a lesson worth bearing, because sometimes the most difficult decision a man can make is the one that preserves his soul. If this tale resonated with you the way it resonated with me, if it left you remembering what still holds true out here, like this video so more people can hear it, and if you'd like to listen to more lost tales of the West, the kind that linger long after the flame dies down, then subscribe and travel along with us. Out here, the next story is always waiting, just over the horizon.